All right. Ready for a deep dive into a career that's making waves, literally.
We're talking aquaculture, right?
You got it. Specifically, water-based aquaculture workers. And get this, by 2050, they say over 60% of our seafood could come from aquaculture. Wild.
It's huge. And honestly, it's way more high-tech than people realize. Forget that image of a lone fisherman. We're talking serious innovation.
So what's it actually like day to day for these aquaculture workers?
Well, every day is different, right? But one day you might be all about water quality. Things like making sure there's enough dissolved oxygen.
Because fish need to breathe too, obviously.
Exactly. Or maybe you're checking ammonia levels, got to make sure the environment's healthy for the fish.
So it's like being a detective, but for fish.
That's a great way to put it. And just like any good detective, you need the right tools, and I'm not talking magnifying glass here. Think high-tech sensors, automated feeding systems, all that good stuff.
Which explains why those career guides you shared were so big on technical skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about loving the water, it's about understanding the science behind it all. Take biosecurity, for instance.
Okay, biosecurity. Now that sounds serious.
It is. Disease outbreaks, they're a big risk in aquaculture. So you got to be on top of those protocols, preventing and controlling the whole 9 yards.
So there's a huge responsibility factor here. It's not just about the fish, it's the whole ecosystem, right?
100%. And that's why you got to always be learning. I mean, these sources, they emphasize staying up to date on disease management, new filtration tech, even data analysis to track growth and make production better.
You know, I'll admit, when I first heard water-based aquaculture worker, I pictured someone just tossing fish food in a pond. This is way more intense than I thought.
Way more. There's this one story from the material about this woman, Sarah. She's an aquaculture technician, but she specializes in, get this, fish nutrition.
Fish nutrition. Okay, now I'm intrigued.
Right. So she starts out volunteering at a hatchery, and now she's developing special feed formulas for different fish species.
See, now that's what I call moving up in the world. But those materials also mention the, shall we say, more demanding aspects of the job. It's not all high-tech and fancy fish food, is it?
Well, you're right. It can be physically demanding. We are talking about working outdoors, sometimes long hours, crazy weather.
You need to be tough for this job.
For sure. You need grit, but also that scientific curiosity. Those are the people who really thrive in this field.
So for those who aren't afraid of a little hard work, maybe some fishy smells, what's in it for them? Besides, helping feed the planet.
Well, good point, because the demand for seafood, it's just going to keep rising. So job security is looking pretty good.
Right.
Plus, there's room to grow. Start as an assistant, maybe end up running a multi-million-dollar facility someday.
Now that's the dream. But, okay, let's say you're all in, love the water, ready to work hard. Where do you even begin?
Experience. That's key, according to what we've got here. Internships, volunteering, even shadowing someone already doing the job.
So real-world experience beats out just reading about it?
It can, for sure. Employers want to know you can actually handle the day-to-day. Speaking of which, there's one thing that can make or break you: the interview.
Dun, dun, dun. The interview, everyone's favorite, right?
Right. But they had some real zingers in those example questions.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
They really wanted to see how you'd handle tough situations. Like one question was, let's say you've got a tank and the dissolved oxygen levels suddenly plummet. What do you do?
Talk about thinking on your feet. You got to be ready for anything in this job, huh?
No doubt. It's not just about knowing the answers, it's about knowing what to do when things go sideways.
So quick thinking, adaptability, those are key. But let's say you nail that interview, you're officially in. What's next? What does climbing that career ladder look like?
Well, you'd probably start as an aquaculture assistant.
Makes sense. Learn the ropes from the ground up.
Exactly. You're getting that hands-on experience figuring how everything works. Think of it as aquaculture boot camp.
Boot camp, but with, hopefully, less yelling.
Right. And from there, you can kind of specialize. Maybe you're really into the tech stuff, like optimizing those automated systems we were talking about. Or maybe you're all about fish health, becoming the go-to person for disease prevention.
There's even that whole entrepreneurial route, right? I mean, the source material mentioned starting your own aquaculture business. What if someone wants to be the next big name in sustainable seafood?
Totally. And it's a real possibility, especially now with everyone wanting local, sustainable food. Like you could corner the market on, I don't know, organic seaweed or something.
Now that's thinking big. But let's zoom out for a second. We've talked a lot about individual careers, but what about the bigger picture? How is aquaculture, like, actually impacting the planet? Where do these workers fit into all of that?
That's where it gets really interesting, right? Like we said, overfishing is a huge problem, and pollution, climate change, it's all putting pressure on our oceans. Aquaculture could be a big part of the solution.
Because we still need to eat.
Exactly. And aquaculture, it can actually be way more sustainable than a lot of traditional farming. And speaking of sustainable, remember those certifications, like the Aquaculture Stewardship Council label.
Yeah, that came up a lot in the material.
It's important. That label, it tells consumers that the seafood they're buying, it was raised responsibly. Good for the environment, good for the workers, the whole deal.
So it's like ethical seafood. I like it. But the material also mentions something called integrated multi-trophic aquaculture. That one kind of went over my head.
It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty cool. It's all about, like, copying how things work in nature, in ecosystems. So instead of just raising one species, you create a system where different species, they all benefit from each other.
Okay, now you've got to give me an example.
Right, so picture this. You've got your salmon, right, swimming around in their pens. Now let's add some seaweed. It'll absorb the extra nutrients from the water, and then maybe some shellfish to filter the water even more. Oh, and you know what else? Sea cucumbers. They'll take care of any waste.
So it's like a perfect little underwater world where nothing goes to waste.
Exactly. Less impact on the environment, plus the fish are healthier. It's a win-win.
See, I'm telling you, this is way more complex than I ever imagined. We've gone from fish food to, like, designing ecosystems.
And that's the thing, is this industry, it's always changing. New technologies, new ideas, it's all constantly evolving, which is why those sources were so big on continuous learning, you know? Conferences, journals, got to stay ahead of the game.
Makes you think about what we buy at the store, you know? Like, are we supporting the good guys or the bad guys?
Exactly. Every time you buy seafood, you're voting with your dollars.
So it's not just about taste, it's about values, too.
For sure. And that's where those labels come in, right? Like that ASC one we talked about.
Yeah.
That's not just a sticker. It means something. Strict standards, good for the environment, good for the workers, the whole package.
Yeah. Like ethical seafood. Okay, but before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's get back to our listener who's thinking, hey, maybe this aquaculture thing is for me. What should they be taking away from all of this?
First things first, do your homework. Loving the ocean is great, but this is a job. It's not all fun and games. You got to be ready to work hard, sometimes long hours, rain or shine, literally.
Definitely not for everyone.
Dude. But if you're up for a challenge, you like figuring things out, and you really care about sustainable food and all that, then yeah, this could be an awesome path.
It's almost like you're not just getting a job, you're joining a movement. Plus, I mean, you get to work with fish all day. How cool is that?
Right. Imagine the stories. And who knows, maybe someday, because of all these hardworking aquaculture folks, we'll be talking about how much even better this industry has gotten.
I like the sound of that. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Hopefully this deep dive has given you a better picture of what it really means to be a water-based aquaculture worker. Until next time, happy exploring.